Welcome to the How to Be Moderately Successful podcast. I'm your host, Mike Scott, and I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Nona Digital. In this podcast, we explore fintech and the founders that power it. We look at how to build better fintech products, better fintech businesses, and how to work on yourself to be as effective as possible in your business and in your life. This podcast is sponsored by ourselves, Nona Digital. We are an expert firm that consults on, designs, and develops fintech software, and we do it with a level of care and excellence that is rare and difficult to match. Working with us, you get access to a deeply skilled and experienced fintech design and development team with a particularly deep experience in blockchain. You get the benefit of a team that is big enough for no key person dependencies to exist, but small enough so that you're always close to the principals. And you get the benefit of our reusable component library, which means we are able to launch your fintech product sooner than anyone else could at a comparable standard. Get in touch to book a call with one of the principals or myself to see how we can help your fintech project to accelerate and succeed. And now onto the show. Today, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be alone, and I'm going to be speaking today about meeting rhythms and how you can set up your meeting rhythms to really help you to go faster, to gain alignment, and to become more efficient. Meeting rhythms for us at Nona have been absolutely critical in the successes that we've had. And although they can feel arduous and sort of trudging through sludge sometimes, it's a critical part, I believe, of any business, particularly if you're building something and if you're trying to go very fast. Without them, we will often just be pulling in different directions. We will be going off in different tangents. We will not be rowing or pulling or whatever metaphor you want to use in the same direction. There is a lot of literature on this stuff. The Scaling Up book, which is fantastic, The Rockefeller Habits by Vern Harnish, is great. They give a lot of information about the EOS system, the entrepreneurial operating system from the book Traction by Gino Wickman is another great source of this kind of stuff. But today I hope to share very practical experience about setting up and optimizing and getting the most from your meeting rhythms. So get a pen and paper and make notes on whatever you find useful, and you are more than welcome to contact me to discuss if you have any questions. The easiest way to get hold of me is on LinkedIn. So let's start with the sort of why we're doing meeting rhythms and what context we're putting them in. So the way that we try to work is it's very important to have a long range idea of where we're going, right? So my belief in our business is it's kind of pointless thinking beyond about 3 years for me. That might be different in your business. So we don't look at sort of 10-year targets or BHAGs as many people speak about. You're welcome to in your business, of course, and if it works for you, that's fine. But for us, we look about 3 years ahead. And the way that we look at the 3-year picture is it's not very particular. It's not massively specific. It's really just to paint a picture of what we want the business, the environment, the people, and all of these things to look like. And we generally put these under categories. So for us, we might say we want to be resilient, and we will define what that means. Is it our balance sheet health? Is it the number of clients that we have? Is it the distribution of clients we have? Then we'll say something like prevalent or well-known, and then we'll talk about what that will look like. You know, which brands are we working on? Are we working on the world's biggest fintech brands, and we have, you know, we've become a household name within the industry? We'll talk about the size of the team. We'll talk about the nature of the team. We'll talk about benefits. For example, one of our sort of big goals is to be the best employer in the industry, offering the best benefits and package to anyone that we employ. And we just create a picture, right? We don't go into huge amounts of detail, but we have a picture and we know where we're going in 3 years' time. Then we break it down to in the next 12 months. Now, in the next 12 months, we begin to get a lot more specific. Our 1-year target is very specific. That will be a specific number of team members. That will have a specific revenue, a specific EBIT. It will have specific measurables that we want to achieve. These are things that we are striving for and that we need to achieve. Our budgets are done against this. So the 1-year picture, the 1-year plan is not vague. It is very specific. And we use it as a benchmark to go the next layer down, which is our quarterly objectives. So we use OKRs. Many businesses use different types of goal setting, but what's important is that we're looking at this 3-year picture, this 1-year very specific picture. We're then taking that 1-year set of goals and we're breaking them down into quarterly rocks, OKRs, goals, objectives, whatever you want to call it. But basically things that we need to achieve this quarter to move us towards the 1-year target, towards the 3-year target. Then we break that down, and this is where the weekly meetings, where the meeting rhythm becomes very relevant. We then break that down into, okay, if we want to achieve these quarterly objectives, we need to have a weekly meeting that is ensuring that we're on track for the quarter, because if we're on track for the week, we're on track for the quarter. If we're on track for the quarter, we're on track for the year. If we're on track for the year, we're on track for the 3-year, and you can see how this begins to cascade down. And then underneath the weekly meeting, we have a daily huddle. And the daily huddle is about alignment and making sure that we never veer off too much, even on a day-to-day basis. So that meeting rhythm and that cascading looks like this. We've got a daily huddle, and we're going to get into detail about this on exactly how this looks and how it works. But we have a daily huddle. This is with our leadership team. We have a weekly meeting, which is serving the quarterly objectives, which is serving the annual goals, which is serving our 3-year vision or our 3-year goal setting. You might go to 10 years, you might go to 20 years, depending on your business and your industry. Chances are, if you're building a fintech, you're not thinking that far ahead because you're moving so quickly. Things are changing so much. At best, you can probably see 3 years ahead, at best, if not less. Many very fast-moving fintechs are thinking 6 months ahead because of how rapidly things are changing in the growth and the acquisition market, etc. So it's really important to just sort of get a sense of why we're doing these meeting rhythms. A lot of companies that I see do meeting rhythms in a bit of a vacuum. They just have a daily huddle. They just have a weekly meeting, but they're not actually in the context of what they're serving. And it's critical to be serving something bigger. It's kind of like in your business, every single person needs to have a purpose, right? And that purpose is simply defined of being part of something bigger than the individual. There's no difference with the meetings. Meetings in and of themselves that aren't actually serving anything are just a waste of time, in my opinion. We need to have strong agendas, and we need to have a reason for doing these meetings. So I'll say it one last time. We've got the cascading reason for these meetings. The daily huddle is serving the weekly meeting, is serving the quarterly objectives, is serving the annual goals, is serving your 3-year picture. All right, so with that said, let's dig into what these meetings actually look like. And again, this is just from my experience. I can't speak to every business, but we have a lot of experience doing this. We've been doing it for a long time. We've been through most of the different models of meeting rhythms. We've been through a lot of coaches and consulting. I've actually done a fair amount of coaching and consulting on this myself. We think we found a set of agendas and constructs that works very well for us. But having said that, we also change it up relatively often. So let's get in that order. Let's begin with the daily huddle. So the daily huddle, as it suggests, is daily, as it suggests. And who's in this meeting? Everything that I'm going to be speaking about today is at a leadership level. So you will have different agendas and you will have different objectives if you're going into your production teams and your sales teams and your operations teams or what have you. But for today's podcast and today's episode, I want to speak about leadership because the majority of our audience is founders that are building things, and I think that that's what will relate to most to you. So the agendas I'm going to speak about today will just be for the leadership team. So when we start off with the daily huddle, what is the purpose of a daily huddle? Well, the purpose of a daily huddle is to keep alignment, especially in the remote world that we all live in at the moment. It's to keep connection, and it's to make sure that we're not veering off too far. If we're only speaking weekly, or in some cases, I can't believe it, but I speak to some companies that literally catch up with their leadership team once a month, which I don't even know how they're running their businesses. But if you're only catching up every week or every 2 weeks or every month, people can go quite far off course before we course correct. If we have a daily huddle, we can check in every single day that we're all rowing in the right direction. And I always speak about conflict and how I don't think conflict is a bad thing as long as the conflict is in the same direction. If you're having conflict with a business partner or someone on the leadership team, that's fine, as long as two things are relevant. One, it's not personal, The minute it gets personal, it's very dangerous. And two, it's fine to argue as long as you're arguing in the same direction. And the daily huddle is a great way to just make sure that no one's going off course too much. And as I said before, to make sure we're connected, particularly in this time of COVID, and then to make sure that we're aligned, right? We don't have to agree on stuff, but we do need to align on stuff. And we can get into what that means if that's interesting to anybody offline. You're welcome to reach out. So what does the daily huddle look like from an agenda perspective? In our case, we have a 30-minute block every single weekday. We very seldom use the full 30-minute block, but we block it out in case there's anything that we want to dig into after the huddle. The actual huddle is very seldom less than 3 minutes per person, and this is what it looks like. So I will be having my daily huddle later on today. It needs to be at exactly the same time every single day. It needs to start on time and it needs to end on time. Vern Harnish shares a couple of very useful meeting truths that the following things need to exist in every meeting to make them useful. Number one, it needs to start on time and it needs to end on time. Number two, there needs to be a timekeeper. So everything needs to be time boxed. Number three, you need to get as close as you can to equal talk time. As a founder, what will generally happen is you will dominate the conversation because you have the most to say and you expect that other people will want you to say the most, and you probably want to say the most, and you probably have a big ego and think that you have the most to offer, but that's just not true. For effective meetings, we need to get as close as we can to equal talk time, and your job as a leader is not to talk all the time, but to bring it out of other people, to allow that space for other people to talk. So start on time, end on time. Timekeeper, everything needs to be time boxed. Get as close as you can to equal talk time and have an agenda. If we can do those things in meetings, our meetings will be a lot better. So with that said, this is what our daily huddle looks like. We begin with a one-word opener. That one-word opener is very simple. It's just a gauge on how you're feeling. So you might say, right now I feel anxious, or you might say excited, or you might say progressing, or you might say overwhelmed, or you might say excited. And it's really just to give your team a sense of where you are today. And it's to look for trends. If somebody is saying overwhelmed, anxious, down every day for 3 weeks in a row, there's a problem, and you should probably reach out to help that person. Then we go on to something I'm grateful for. It's critical, especially in the strange world we're living in at the moment, to just think about gratitude. This is more for the individual than it is for sharing, but just to take that couple of seconds to think, okay, well, today I'm grateful for X. Then we go on to the main thing I need to get done today is. So this is an exercise in focus, right? So when we're doing the preparation, we say, my one word is this, I feel like this. Today I'm grateful for this. Then it's an exercise in, okay, if there's just one thing that I get done today, what is that one thing? So the main thing I want to get done today is, and you say the main thing. Then you say, other things I'm doing today. And this is a bit of an art. Then you go and list all the other things that you've got going on that day. You don't list every single email you're writing. It's just the things that you think you should share with other people that might be relevant. So in my case, I might say, the main thing I need to get done today is get a first draft of an article that I want to write done. Other things I'm doing is I'm interviewing somebody for a podcast. I'm recording this podcast that I'm doing right now. I've got a couple of business development calls that I'm speaking to. I've got to do some prep work for our offsite that's coming up in a month, et cetera, et cetera. Then you go on, you say challenges. So you share the challenges that you have at the moment. So these are just things that they're challenges that you want to give energy to, right? So you share the challenges. Then you share the good things, all the good things that are going on. We won this, we're doing well here, we got a good feedback from this client over there, we have a new candidate that we want to hire over there. I've reached this number of followers on LinkedIn, the podcast is getting this many downloads. It's just the good things to share. And then right at the end, we say something a behavior that I would like to keep from the last 24 hours and a behavior that I would drop from the last 24 hours. So for me, it might be, I would like to keep a good morning routine this morning, which was good. And I would like to drop choosing not to train yesterday, right? So it's really just an insight into your own behaviors, which result in being a better leader or a better functioning person. So just to run through that again, one word opener, something I'm grateful for. The main thing I need to get done today is other things I'm doing today, challenges I'm experiencing, good things I want to share, a behavior I would like to keep from the last 24 hours, and a behavior I would like to drop from the last 24 hours. That's it. You can easily get that done in 3 minutes per person. In our case, there are 5 people that join the daily huddle, so that's 15 minutes. We have a 30-minute block. The reason we have a 30-minute block is because very often there'll be some very quick conversations that happen afterwards. And actually, those very quick conversations that happen afterwards, often we make really quick decisions, which are very effective in that. That happens every single day. You never, ever miss that daily huddle. If you're on a flight or if you're in a meeting that you just simply cannot miss, then you send your update, in our case, via WhatsApp. But you never, ever miss that huddle. Okay, so that's the daily huddle. So now we'll move on to the weekly meeting. And in our case, we block off 2.5 hours every week for the weekly meeting, but we try to get it done in 2 hours. We just have a 30-minute buffer there in case we get into conversation that requires more time. But we try not to use that extra 30 minutes. Now, just a reminder, we've done the daily huddle. The daily huddle is making sure that we're on track for the weekly meeting. The weekly meeting exists to make sure that we're on track for the quarter. So if we're on track for the day, we're on track for the week. If we're on track for the week, we're on track for the quarter. Once again, we go through these principles of meetings. Critical that there is an agenda, that we start on time and end on time, that everything is time boxed and time kept, that we aim and strive for as much equal talk time as possible, and that we have a very strict agenda. So the weekly meeting exists, as I've said before, to make sure that we're on track for the quarter. So we have a very strict agenda. Who's in our weekly meeting? In our case, we have our broader leadership team. So there are 7 people in our leadership meeting. It's all of the directors, and then it's all of the head of departments. So we have our COO, our CTO, our head of development, our head of design. We have myself, who's the CEO. We've got the head of operations. So it's everyone that's running the business, all the senior heads of in our case. So the weekly meeting begins as follows. I actually read out every single time. I read out why we do it. We've been doing this for years, but it's still very important to reiterate this. So I literally read out the following. I say, guys, we're in the weekly meeting. Why do we do the weekly meeting? Well, we do the weekly meeting to stay on track and focused on our vision. If we're on track for the week, we're on track for the quarter. Then I talk about really questioning the issues that we've raised, and I'll get to this a little bit later. Are they appropriate for this forum, or can they be taken offline? Then I remind everyone that this meeting is to keep momentum and keep connection to the quarterly objectives. In our case, we use OKRs. Don't worry about it if you don't know what that is. You can call them rocks, you can call them OKRs, you can call them quarterly goals, you can call them whatever you want. But what's critical is that we keep momentum and connection to our OKRs, our quarterly objectives. I then remind everyone that we need full commitment and focus to this session. This is very expensive time. So I remind everyone to close all their windows, to turn off their notifications, no distractions or open windows that don't relate to the meeting. Otherwise, we're wasting everybody's time. And then I go through the roles in the meeting. So I'm running the agenda. Other people have different roles in the meeting. Then we get into what we call a segue. So just a sort of a warm-up and a container building. So there's various different ways to do this. Our current iteration is every week I will just come up with something cool, right? I'll come up with something that I think is cool anyway. That is just to share with everybody. So I'm just going to check my notes, what the last one was. So I'll give you an example of this. So in our most recent weekly meeting, I asked everyone, including myself, 2 things, right? These 2 things were, what is the one main thing you want to achieve this week? So in my case, the answer for that last week was I want to finish my article on real estate tokenization to a point that it is worth reading. Okay, so that's my focus for the week. Everybody goes around and we share that. That's very quick. Then last week we had a second question, which was, so we have a very big focus at the moment on creating content, right? Good content for FinTech founders. And the other one was everyone had to think about and prepare sitting with a FinTech founder over coffee. What is something that you believe you could teach that person that would help them on their journey? and everybody had to share that. And what's interesting about this is that was just last week. We don't do this every week. But, funnily enough, the thing that I said that I think I could help people with is setting meeting rhythms and how to facilitate them. And here I am now creating a piece of content in the form of a podcast that came out of that exercise. So in that weekly meeting, we begin with that segue, just something to build the container to get everybody in the room, and that'll change from week to week. Right, then the next thing we'll do is we will go through our scorecard and budget review. So every business is going to have a different type of scorecard, but really what you're looking for here is you're looking for sort of 10 to 15 numbers that you want to be tracking week to week. And you don't just want to be tracking them, but you want to be tracking them against a target, right? And these are things that can move the needle. So here you don't track things like revenue and profit. You don't track things that are lagging. You track leading indicators. So here we're looking at things like, what do we anticipate our revenue to be this quarter? What do we anticipate our profit to be this quarter? How much production did we get through this past week? What are we looking at on the sales and marketing side? How many new leads do we have? How much content have we created? What are all of our followers on all of our different platforms doing? What is our website traffic doing? What is our billable efficiency? What capacity do we have? Every business is going to be different, but it's a really good exercise to be looking at these numbers week on week on week, but not just in a vacuum. You look at these numbers against targets. Now, this is harder than it sounds, and actually, it is a really good exercise to force you to think about this, because when you have to set targets, you've got to start thinking about, okay, well, actually, what do these numbers need to look like? How many leads do we need to get in? How many, if you have a product, how many users do we need to have? What are the metrics that we really need to be moving week on week and week? So this is a very quick 10-minute overview of the entire snapshot of the business. There is no discussion. Right? This is one person reading out these scorecards. This is a good time to talk about how we capture things to talk about and what our process is. So we use a platform called Trello, and what we do is anything that you want to discuss at all. This is this is in between the weekly meetings. This is during the weekly meetings. You don't interrupt. You drop down a card onto Trello into a column. And basically anything that comes up until later on, you'll see what I'm talking about, up until the time that we dedicate to talk about and solve issues. Anything that comes up, you don't raise your hand, you don't interrupt, you just drop a card down. So for example, if we're going through the scorecard and our financial director is reading out our cash metrics and I've got a question, I don't stop him. What I do is I just go to the Trello board and I drop down a card and I say, whatever, I drop down like question on cash buffer target, right? I don't stop him, I drop it down. Later on in the meeting, there's going to be time that's dedicated to talk about all of these issues. Right, so we run through the scorecard, that's 10 minutes, okay? No discussion, anything you want to talk about, you drop it down. After that, we go through our quarterly objective check-ins. So I've mentioned a few times we use OKRs, which is a goal-setting framework, but you can use rocks, you can use goals, you can use OKRs, you can use whatever you want. But here we take 20 minutes to do two things. Number one, I read out our annual plan to everybody. So every single week, I'm reminding everybody what our 12-month targets, goals, plan, whatever you want to call it, looks like. And that's specific. Remember, we've got 3-year picture, 1-year plan, quarterly objectives, weekly meeting. So I read out our 1-year plan, no discussion. Then we go through our quarterly objectives. Once again, we use OKRs, but we have company-wide quarterly objectives and we have departmental quarterly objectives. So we take 20 minutes to give an overview of this is how we are tracking at a company level on our objectives. And there is one person responsible for every one of these objectives, not 2 people, one person responsible for each one of these. We generally have about 3 at a company level. Then we move on to departmental. Again, within the departments, each one of these things is responsible by one person. And the objective of this session is, again, no discussion. We just read out, this is how we're doing, this is the percentage against completeness that we're doing, this is where I'm stuck, this is where I need help, etc. It's just an overview. There is zero discussion. Once again, if there's anything you want to talk about, you drop it down onto that list that we get to later. This we generally get through actually in a lot quicker than 20 minutes these days. It used to take us a long time. Once this is done, I then give everybody just 2 or 3 minutes to think about their quarterly responsibilities and to think about what they can do in the next 7 days to drive their quarterly objectives forward. I give 1 or 2 minutes, we all think about it, and we all put those down on the Trello board as well under the column 7-day to-do lists. So really, this is a good time to talk about what the objective is of a weekly meeting. Well, the objective of the weekly meeting is to make sure that we're on track for the quarter, right? But how do we do that? Well, we do that in 2 ways. We talk about issues and we solve issues, but we also populate things to do. We create actionables. So on the Trello board, we've got the discussion list, and then we've got the 7-day to-do lists, which are things that we commit to doing in between the meeting we're in and the meeting that will happen next week. Okay, so coming back to the quarterly objectives, we go through the quarterly objectives, and we then commit to things that we're going to do in the next 7 days to drive these things forward. Right, now you've documented them, there's accountability, and you've given a time on them. After that, we do a quick thing called customer/employee headlines. What we do here is we go around each one of the people in the leadership team. In our case, there's 7. Everybody gets, I think it's 2 minutes each. And it's very simple what we do here. It's short and sweet headlines, no discussion, just the headline, things about customers or people in the business, so customers or employees that are good or bad, doesn't really matter. We just say, cool, customer X is really happy about this and we got this testimonial, that's great. Next thing might be, we had a complaint about this thing from that customer, this is what we're doing about it, all good, under control. Then it might be Bob in engineering has really been amazing. Just, he's been fantastic. Or, whatever. Sally in marketing is really struggling with this, that, and the next thing, but we're on top of it. So it's just very high level. This is what's going on at a customer level, at a business level from everyone in the group, because everybody's seeing different things in the business in a different way. If you want to drop something down to discuss, you drop it down to discuss. So hopefully at this point, you're seeing a trend. Throughout everything up until this point, there's no discussion. You're just giving data to populate the discussion area when it comes later, which is the bulk of the meeting. Then once everybody's given their custom employee headlines, we've introduced something which is quite cool, where you've got to give kudos to somebody on the leadership team. So somebody on this call for the last week. So I might say, cool, and I just want to give kudos to Gordon for putting out some really fantastic design work for X customer. Somebody else might say, I want to give kudos to Ed for some amazing work that he did for this staff member or whatever. It's just recognition of things that have been done in a cool way. If you're anything like us, we struggle to celebrate. We're not good at celebrating. We're always looking for the things that are wrong so we can make it better. This is a good way to, it's a bit forced, but it's a good kind of forced to bring celebration and recognition and acknowledgement into the process. Then we get into the to-do list review. So this is really quick. This is basically, we look at the things that were committed to last week and we review them. So we have 3 or 4 labels on this. Basically, it's done, or it's progress made, but I want to keep it on for 1 more week, or it's no progress made and I want to keep it on for 1 more week, or it's been on here for more than 2 weeks. Nothing should ever be on there for more than 2 weeks. If it's been on there for more than 2 weeks, either it should get taken off or it should be made smaller. But the idea is that 90% of these cards are dropping off each week. So 90% of what the team is committing to do every week should get done every week. And the 2-week label is really there to just say, hey man, this has been on here for 2 weeks. One of 2 things are happening here. Either it's too big, we need to make it smaller, or you're actually not going to do this and we should just be real about it. But you can't leave things on there for more than 2 weeks. Everybody reads their own cards out. That's really quick. That's a 5-minute process. So at this point, it sounds like a lot, but we've only been going for a 15-minute intro, a 10-minute scorecard review, so that's 25 minutes, a 20-minute OKR check-in or quarterly objective check-in, so that's 45 minutes, customer employee headlines, it's 55 minutes, and a to-do list, that's 1 hour. So we're 1 hour in, and at this point, we've now got a complete view of the entire business in 1 hour with no discussion. It's pretty efficient. Then we take a break for 10 minutes to go and have tea, coffee, bio break, whatever you need. When we come back, this is the bulk of the meeting. This is why the meeting now exists. When we come back, we've now got a whole long list on Trello of all these things we need to discuss, right? And this is where we actually solve the issue. So then we set a 50-minute timer, and we get into discussing the issues. How do we decide on which issues to discuss? We vote on them. Trello has got a cool function where we can all vote. So we've got a long list of these issues now. Everybody goes in, we get 3 votes each, and we vote on the issues and we rank them. And we continually do that. The reason we do this is because if any one person gets to choose what issues we discuss, it's going to be a bit biased. Also, if you just do it from top to bottom, the most important issue might be sitting at the bottom, and just because of where it is, it doesn't actually get discussed. If you're voting on it, it's a really simple, efficient way. You use the Trello function, you vote on them, you discuss it, you vote on them again, and it just keeps self-selecting, which is pretty cool. The idea of these discussion items is to generate actionables. They're not just to sit and talk. It's really simple. We bring it up, we say what we want from the card. So let's say I raise a card that says, whatever. Should we buy a new coffee machine? I mean, that's a terrible example, but whatever. Before I start talking about should we buy a new coffee machine, I have to state what I want from the card. So I say, I want a decision from this card, or I just want to discuss this a little bit, or I just want to raise this and bring it to everyone's attention, or you have to state what you actually want from the card, not just the topic. So I'll say, I'd like us to get to a decision today about whether we get a new coffee machine. Then we go around and we talk about the coffee machine. We bring it to an actionable as soon as we can. We then populate the 7-day to-do list with that actionable, and we move the card over to completed, and we archive it. This, we set a 50-minute timer, and in 50 minutes, if you're good, you can get through a lot of issues. We'll get through easily 15 to 20 issues in 50 minutes. Massively efficient. Remember, before this, we've got a very good sense of what's happening in the business because of all the things we've been through up until this point. So this 50 minutes is incredibly efficient. We get through a lot of stuff, and it's time boxed. Once that 50 minutes is up, remember, you've got to have an agenda. It's got to be time boxed. You've also had a lot of equal talk time. Once that 50 minutes is up, we get through the conclude process. Okay? The conclude process is quite simple. This is what it looks like. We run through the final to-do list for the week ahead. So we run through those 7-day to-do items for the week ahead, and we make sure that everyone's happy with them, that their name is on it, that they're committing to do it. We ask if there's anything that we need to communicate to the business. If there is anything, what is it, and who needs to communicate it? Then I ask everybody to do the following 3 things. What was your main takeaway from this meeting? Rate the meeting 1 to 10, and a 1-word close about how you feel. Remember, we had a 1-word opener. You have a 1-word close. Then in our case, we do a company-wide stand-up every week. So what we do at the end of our meeting is we ask for anyone to share any shout-outs, anything about anyone in the business that has been great. So we populate it here, so we don't have to do it in a disparate way. So at the end of that, we say, hey, any shout-outs for anyone for the company-wide stand-up, which is coming up, whatever, on Tuesday. And then that's pretty much it. And then we're done. So this is running for between 2 and 2.5 hours, and we've gotten through a hell of a lot here. We've made sure that we're on track for the quarter, and we've populated a whole bunch of to-do lists for the week. So between the daily huddle and the weekly meeting, we're really just making sure that we're continuously aligned, that we're generating very relevant and strong actionables from week to week to week, which ensures that we're on track from quarter to quarter, which ensures that we're on track for the year, which helps us to achieve our 3-year picture. Then we move on to the quarterly planning sessions, right? Now, the quarterly planning sessions can take many, many forms, and I'm going to go through this one a little bit quicker because this is actually very, very long. In our case, because we're living in a remote world, we do our quarterly planning remotely over a number of days. So it used to be in person, we would go away for 2 or 3 days and it was awesome. In a remote world, it's obviously changed. Now, I'm not going to go into massive detail in our quarterly planning. I'm just kind of going to give you the headlines. So what we do is we gather information And again, this is very much inspired by things like the EOS system from Scaling Up and Vern Harnish's, the EOS system from Traction by Gino Wickman and Vern Harnish's Scaling Up Rockefeller Habits. It's a bit of both. It's a bit of our own stuff, but there's tons of available information on this kind of stuff. So for us, we take this, in our case, we have 3 sessions leading up to our quarterly offsite. And then our quarterly offsite now in a remote world runs Monday, Tuesday, we break on Wednesday, and then a Thursday and a Friday, and it's 3 hours per day. So 3 hours on Monday, 3 hours on Tuesday, break on Wednesday, 3 hours on Thursday, 3 hours on Friday. What do we cover? Well, in the lead up to this, we have 3 sessions. We call them BOSI sessions, Business Operating System Improvement Sessions. One session is we go through our budget and we review and check our budget, our salary increases, our raises. What are we doing? What are our targets? Are we on track for the budget? Are we off track for the budget? We then also go through our vision planning. Do we still align on our values? Do we align on our mission? Do we align on our vision? Do we still align on our 1-year plan? Just going through our vision, we look at our marketing 3 uniques. We look at our niche. We question all of that stuff. This is in the session leading up to this. The second session leading up to this virtual offsite is what we call the People Day. This is where we would have sent out forms for everybody in the business to fill in. We call it Start, Stop, Continue. What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? What should we continue doing? We get everybody to rate their level of engagement for the past 3 months, and we get everyone to rate whether they would refer somebody to work at Nona, whether they think Nona is an amazing place to work, on a scale of 1 to 10. So the one session is budget, looking at our vision, looking at our marketing stuff. The other session is going through the people stuff. So we read all of the stuff out together and we make notes. Who needs attention? Who's unhappy? Who's happy? Who's dropped off on their numbers? We just get a good sense of every single person in the business who needs attention, where there are problems, where there's good alignment. So that's the second session. Then when we get into the actual quarterly planning, this is sort of very roughly how it looks. So it's 3 hours per day, Monday and Tuesday, break on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And this is what we get through. Now, I'm going to run through this quite quickly because I don't want to get into huge detail, but you're welcome to reach out to me. So day 1 is recap, alignment, and intention day. I give a CEO's opening, so I summarize the quarter that's been, and we then get into exploring the prep work that the leadership team would have done beforehand. So I would have sent out a whole bunch of prep work, and this is what they have to give. Everyone needs to share the top 3 outcomes that they require for the next 4 days to make this feel like a success. So we talk about those, we share them, and I put them down on a Trello board so that we can continually revisit those to make sure that we're actually achieving what we want to achieve. We then review the actionables list that was generated from the previous offsite, right? So there will be a whole lot of stuff that we committed to do from the previous quarterly planning. We review those. If they're done, that's great. If they're not done, we question whether we should leave them on. Then we go through a very cool tool that is offered by the EOS system in Traction, which is called the organizational checkup, which is basically a very cool tool that allows you in a very difficult to hide way to evaluate every single part of your business. So you can Google organizational checkup, but basically we use this to get scores across the entire business. We look at where we've gotten better or worse from the previous quarter, and that gives us a good indication of what are the things we need to work on for the quarter ahead. We then go through a quick numbers review by our financial director. So just saying, how did we do? What are concerns? What's exciting? Just a quick overview of the quarter before. Then we jump into discussion time, right? So we would have now populated a whole bunch of things and we get into these deeper conversations. Then we conclude for the day, and that's day 1. Day 2, I try to have what I call like a mystery exercise or a blue sky day. So really what this is about is coming up with a cool exercise that we don't get to do in our weekly meetings or our daily meetings. So a good example of this will be, we'll start the day, we'll do some container building, we'll do some trust building exercises, we'll review the actionables so far, and then we'll have a 2-hour session where we use breakout rooms in this world of remote at the moment, and we get into conversations like this. This is an example of what we might do. Is I might say, okay, somebody has a gun to your head, like you're going to die unless we can double revenue in the next 6 months. What do you do? right? So you're removing all these barriers. You're saying, don't think in the confines of reality. Think literally life or death. If your life literally depended on it, what ridiculously crazy things would you do to double revenue in the next 6 months, for example? And it's really amazing what can come out of these types of things. So that's just an example of something. But this day is really about blue sky thinking, opens thinking, creative thinking. And it's really good to do this. And it's actually pretty fun if it's facilitated well. Then again, we conclude the process and that's day 2 done. Then we take a break on the Wednesday. We jump back into it on the Thursday. The Thursday is now getting into kind of like the rubber hitting the road. So the Thursday is what we call our OKR setting day, or you might say quarterly objectives, you might say rocks, you might say goals. But this day is all about setting the objectives for the quarter that's coming. So just to remind you, we've got our 3-year picture, we've got our 1-year targets. In order to achieve those, we need to set our quarterly objectives very accurately, which our weekly meetings serve and our daily huddles serve. So this day is all about what are the company priorities that we have to get done this quarter in order to move the business closer towards our 1-year plan. We generally look to set about 3 at a company level and then 1 to 3 at a departmental level per department. So that's what this day is all about. We do the usual opening process. We do container and trust building. We review the actionables, and then we spend 2.5 hours setting these OKRs. In the prep work that I've sent out before this whole process, I would have asked everybody to please think about and list what they think the OKR should be for the business and what they think the OKR should be for their department. So there has been a lot of thinking work that's already happened here. So a lot of this stuff is kind of just really putting the polish on what we sort of already know the focuses should be. Then we get into our final day of the quarterly offsite, which is really just the wrap-up day. So here it's the usual opening process, the trust and container building process, reviewing the actionables, and then we review everything. So we review the quarterly objectives. Are we sure that this is actually right for the quarter? And usually we put that final polish on this day. We review our vision document. Are we still happy with our niche, our marketing position, our values, our mission, all of these things? We have a look at that. We then will always have some time left over for the final things to discuss that we haven't discussed yet. And then we review the actionables for the quarter ahead, and everybody aligns on that. And then we do a longer conclusion process. So here we rate the meeting overall. We talk about whether we got, right in the beginning, you might remember, I said that you have to list your top 3 things that you need from this to make it feel like a success. We have a look at whether we will achieve those respectively. And then I offer and I invite in improvement suggestions for the next time we go around, because we always want to improve. We don't want to get stuck into that process of saying, well, we're always going to do it this way because this is how we've always done it. We invite in improvement suggestions and we have little improvements all the time. And then we wrap up, and that is the quarterly planning process. So I've just spewed a lot of information at you guys. And if you're still listening to this, that's great. And you probably have a whole bunch of questions. But really, what I really want you to take home is it's all about alignment. It's about setting that bigger 3-year goal, or maybe 10 years if you could do that in your business. From the 3-year, what does it look like roughly? Then down to the 1 year, what does it look like in great detail? Then down to the quarter, how are we going to get there in the next 90 days? Then down to the weekly meeting to make sure you're on track for the quarter, all the way down to that daily huddle. And that alignment and that cascading is incredibly powerful to keep the team aligned, to keep everybody pushing or rowing or pulling or whatever you want to say in the same direction, and to make sure that no one's veering off too much. So, massive amount of information thrown at you guys in a very short space of time. Hopefully this was useful. Almost everything that I've spoken about is available in many different forms in many different places. As I said, we take great inspiration from Vern Harnish's Rockefeller Habits and Scaling Up, from Gino Wickman's Traction book and the Entrepreneur's Operating System, and then just our own experience. Love to talk about this stuff. So if you want to hear about it, please, or if you want to discuss it rather, reach out to me. I'm always open for a good chat. And if you're building a fintech business, this can be incredibly valuable to go faster, and to go faster in a more efficient and a more aligned manner. And it's how we run our business, and it's done very well for us. So I hope that was useful to you guys. It was actually very useful to me to get my thoughts together and to get this down on paper, so to speak. And I'd love to hear from you. So thanks for listening to the How to Be Moderately Successful podcast. I do hope you got some value from today's discussion, and I'd love to know in the comments what you thought about this as well as a solo. I've never done a solo episode before. If you'd like to discuss your fintech product or project with a team of experts in design and development, you're welcome to book a call with myself or one of the principals on our website, which is www.nona.digital. And I'll be back next week with another episode to explore fintech and the founders that power it.